Tonight's speaker is Richard Angelo Jr. He is a graduate of Oakland University with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. He has a law degree from Detroit College of Law. For those of you, it's also known as Michigan State University. He is a member of the State Bar of Michigan and part of the Animal Law Section. In 2009, he became a council member of the Animal Law Section, and his passion is animal law. He also handles bankruptcies, business and transaction law, commercial transactions, estate planning, and again, animal law. If you're interested, he does have a blog, and that is at mishanimalaw.blogspot.com. That's MICHANIMALLAW.blogspot.com. And to give you your speaker, here is Mr. Angelo.
Thank you very much for everyone coming. I half expected a slightly larger crowd, so I'm going to kind of talk. It is, isn't it? I always like to have people interact, ask questions. I know that usually with subjects like this, we can go on forever and ever, it seems. So, a little bit of background behind mine is I've been in practice for about 12 years. I used to represent mortgage companies and finance companies, banks, and whatnot. Been a member of the Animal Law Section, as Sherry stated, since 2007. In Michigan, a lot of people don't know the State Bar of Michigan actually has an Animal Law Section. It was the first one in the country. We're pretty active in various legislative matters. I tend to focus more on litigation type matters. Animal issues have always been a passion of mine. I was lucky enough to marry my wife who shares that passion with me, in fact, probably more so. So we've always been heavily involved in rescue. We have several shelter/rescue animals that live with us right now, and we work on a regular basis with rescues around the state. Starting in maybe the mid-2000s, I wanted to get more involved in animal legal issues because it seemed that there was a need in Michigan for it. Not too many lawyers tended to focus on it. It was very hard, I found, for folks who had an animal-related issue to, and this is not a knock on other lawyers, but to take them seriously with the issues that they might have been involved in. So I went out on my own in approximately 2009. My office is in Davison, and approximately half of my practice nowadays is devoted solely to animal-related issues. And I go all around the state. I've had cases in Grayling, Traverse City, Grand Rapids, Montcalm County, you name it. Most people don't think of the law when they start thinking about animal-related issues, and there are, you could, like I said before, you could go on and on. Most of the issues that I deal with are ownership disputes, dangerous dog issues, local government homeowners association disputes, usually regarding how many or what type of animal you might be able to have. I've been involved in breed-specific legislation issues, and also dealing with what was called pound seizure in Montcalm County. Basically, where a shelter was able to sell shelter animals to Class B dealers who in turn brokered those animals for research. Also, believe it or not, I do get involved in civil rights violations as far as animals go. I have several issues dealing with police shooting dogs or violating owner of a dog's civil rights, or cats for that matter. I keep leaving cats out of it, and I do actually have a couple of horse-related cases as well. One of the biggest problems I find in dealing with clients who might have an issue related to animals is they get me involved or another lawyer involved too late. And I think that's probably, they don't, number one, don't know they can have a lawyer involved, And number two, they don't really take it seriously. Most of what I do, I would say half of the animal-related issues I deal with are dangerous dog matters. Those move rather quickly through the court system. There's usually one hearing. They come up when a dog seriously injures or kills either a human or another animal. Usually a dog, actually, is the way the state law is written. So a lot of times I get the call after the people have gone to the hearing and the judge says my dog has to be put to sleep. It's far easier for me to deal with it at the hearing than it is for me to be appealing it for years on end. So knowing your rights and how the law applies to your rights as to your animals is extremely important, and that's part of my mission in dealing with. I speak at various rescue groups, shelters, different organizations, and bring up all these issues, just trying to bring them to light. As I mentioned, most of the cases that I deal with are dangerous dog matters, usually, unfortunately, involving what are referred to as pit bulls. They get a bad rap, so it's fairly quick to move through the court system, have the judge order them put down. Like I said, serious injury or death to a person or another dog is the standard that's being used in Michigan. It's the way the state law is written in dealing with it. Usually, like I said, it's one hearing. You got to have an expert witness in it. It gets expensive. I think that's the second hurdle that people in dealing with legal issues. So I try to work with people on that kind of thing. Obviously, can't do it for free in most cases, but certainly under a severe discount, just because it's a passion of mine. Other issues that I've been involved in most recently are local ordinances limiting the number of dogs and type of dog that you have. Homeowners Association. I have a case going on right now where the woman she worked with a rescue group and she was a foster, had 4 dogs in her house and thought she was in compliance with the county ordinance, which she was. She was in compliance with her local township ordinance. However, her homeowners association said you can only have 2. And now she's got to find a way to either get rid of her 2 dogs or working on that type of thing out. So one of the biggest issues that have been coming up recently, in fact, just 2 days ago, a breed-specific legislation is very big in this area. Saginaw, Flint has considered it a couple times. Possible they can consider it again. Saginaw actually made the first step the other day under their dangerous dog ordinance in improving the language of it. They'll have a second vote coming up soon where they're going to ban, not ban, but require extensive registration for various types of dogs. German Shepherds, I believe Malamutes are on that list, pit bull type dogs. So it's another big issue that's coming up. On the heels of Saginaw doing that vote, on, I believe it was Tuesday in the state legislature, a representative from Grosse Pointe actually introduced a bill to phase out the ownership of pit bulls over the next 10 years. Hopefully that bill is not going anywhere. Supposedly I got an email from the American Kennel Club today telling me that it's not going to get a hearing in the committee. So for now it's probably dead, but it's something that keeps coming up. So I do try to get involved in those either on the legislative end or helping and assisting groups in navigating their way through the red tape of either county or local and sometimes state government. I don't know, I'd like to tailor what I talk about to who's here. I know Ms. Johnson, right? Dawn is here from the Humane Society.
My name is Marty Steffen. I'm a security supervisor at the Flint Institute Arts.
Okay. Just out of interest, huh?
No, I'm here about a specific, about service animals.
Okay.
Trying to get some information on them.
Okay. like I said, this afternoon I did get an email from the American Kennel Club. They believe it's pretty much dead for now. Luckily, 2 days after it was introduced, but we'll see how it goes.
I'm Deetria Taylor. I'm here primarily out of interest. I'm an animal lover.
Okay.
I would be interested in having my own animal sanctuary someday, but for right now, I just have a pet cat and was wondering if I could, I guess, kind of like how he's interested in the like animal service or the therapy animal, to find out if there's any way to have my cat classified as like a therapy cat, so that when I move around, that issue won't pop up, because I am a disabled adult, so.
Got you.
Yeah.
As a service animal under the ADA.
Yeah, because I do better having, and I really could have any animal. I could have a rabbit and be fine. It's just.
You have the cat.
Yeah, this time it's a cat.
Exactly.
Next time it might be a dog. So.
Well, I think you're probably going to have a little bit of an issue
I
there.
have to do some research. Or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Okay.
Most
The
of the time
general
it
interest.
deals with dogs in most cases.
Okay.
They just took the cats off the service animal listing
Yep.
and then put in miniature horses.
Maybe that's the route I have to go.
Yep. Well, that's another issue that the Americans with Disabilities Act that has been used quite a bit by animal lawyers across the country in dealing with a number of issues, to be quite honest with you. There's, in fact, the animal law section is involved in an issue in Ingham County right now. Ingham County Parks actually say right on their brochures, you cannot have an animal in the park. Something to the effect of, even if it is a service animal, which is a direct violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And they have it printed and are circulating it throughout the county. Other people in Denver, for that matter, in fact, a case just went through because Denver is famous for their pit bull ban. There was a gentleman who had a pit bull service animal, and they're in violation with the ban of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I believe it's still on appeal. Denver's pretty hard-headed, I guess, for lack of a better term, in dealing with that issue. But
For me, it would be housing. I wouldn't necessarily need an animal to take out and about in public.
Sure.
It would be more like seeking an apartment or something, just knowing that I have this animal.
that wouldn't be able to restrict you from having your animal.
Yeah. So that would be what, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into that a little further for you too, because it might be under the Fair Housing Act as well.
Okay.
They might reference each other. Usually those federal laws do.
Okay.
This, boy, where do I even go from here? One of the other, I represent a lot of rescue groups. Rescue groups are usually the ones who end up calling me and have some sort of problem either with a governmental entity, be it a shelter or the Michigan Department of Agriculture, whatever it might be. So dealing with those regulations is, be it the MDA or whatever county regulation you might be dealing with. I get involved in those a lot, and a lot of times it is flying by the seat of your pants, because a lot of the counties are different in how they deal with things. Certainly our county is very different in how they deal with the structure of the animal shelter and how the actual operations of that shelter from a day-to-day basis. I know they had a new director. In fact, she's from, I believe, the Humane Society, Stephanie. She's trying hard, I think. She's trying hard. But when rescue groups are dealing with shelters, the biggest questions I get are pulling animals, whether the hold times are right. I find, in fact, I brought a handout for some of the folks if you want them. There was an explanation put out in 2008 by the Department of Agriculture on how to interpret those hold times, because so many rescue shelters animal protection shelters licensed under the state did not know how to calculate these times, especially when it came to stray animals. Basically, it's 4 days on a stray animal. If the dog or cat has some sort of licensure where you can identify the animal, it's 7 days. Where we were running into issues were Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, days that you're not open do not count. And they were counting them many times. An animal was coming into a shelter on a Friday and being put down on Monday or Tuesday, depending on who was calculating the times. I'm not sure how. I look at it as it's your job to know that. You're a licensed shelter under the state. You're charged with knowing those laws. It shouldn't be up to the state to come around and bring those up. It shouldn't be up to the rescues to bring them up. But more often than not, I have to deal with it. It's always amazing to me how mistaken some shelters are in dealing with some of the regulations. I just got a question the other day. In fact, I've heard from a number of people about recently the animal shelter reports came out from the MDA, basically showing intake of animals throughout the year for each reporting shelter, what they did with them, whether they were adopted, euthanized, transferred to rescue. There's an other category, sold. I've been hearing a lot lately, in fact, most recently from the Michigan Humane Society. Their euthanasia rates, kill rates, whatever you want to refer to them as, are higher because people bring them the animal and request that they be put down. And they say that affects their numbers. There's also a guideline put out by the MDA saying that those animals do not, no matter what, get included in those numbers. So it's somewhat misleading when they're talking to the public. There are a lot of, some people call them no-kill, some people call them what, I refer to them as no-kill. I've been to a couple of no-kill conferences where these numbers are very, very important to people, those people anyway. And when you start talking about them, you start realizing how much confusion and mistaken perceptions there are about some of the things that the shelters do. Those are two of the biggest examples that I run into on occasion. And I have those handouts with me today if you'd like. Why don't we deal with your question?
Well, we've done some research on it, because we had a lady come in with 2 large poodles and claimed that they were service animals, but they weren't marked, and she refused to identify herself as needing service animals, and she threatened to sue us. So we started doing some research, and we found out the state has laws that the dog has to be tagged and everything else, but federal law says they don't have to have anything.
Right.
So
it is against federal law for her to represent that those are service animals, if they are not.
well, the point is how do we know? I mean, where do we reach the point where we can tell, I'm sorry, man, we don't allow animals in here, you know, because we don't allow them in unless they are service animals.
Right.
So how are we supposed to determine when and if they're service animals?
It's a very difficult question to answer. You run into a sticky, you're not even really allowed to ask for proof under the ADA.
Right. I know it, that's why, you know.
And the ADA is going to trump state law on that.
So in other words, we don't have, all they say is it's a service animal, we have to let them in.
Yep. And if they ever get caught in that those animals are not service animals, it's a 5-year felony.
Now, are they allowed to have more than one service animal at a time?
It's another question. That probably a good one. There is not. The Americans with Disabilities Act does not state that they can only have one, especially if those animals serve different purposes for her. Now, if someone walks into your place with 4 animals and says, yep, my Chihuahuas are all service animals, you probably can raise an eyebrow and get in touch with the appropriate federal agency.
And they're just gonna say, well, there's no regulation for it. Because I mean, the federal regulations are so wide open and unclarified that it's impossible to really ask anybody anything and be able to ask them legally.
You can't ask the person, technically. You can contact, USDA tends to be very helpful on those issues. If you call them, they're almost always willing to talk to you. I've talked to them numerous times. They'll pick up the phone and talk to you. They could provide you some guidance as to how to get around that issue. As far, I'm certainly not going to tell you one way or the other here tonight. It's such a sticky thing when you get into asking those folks. I would hate to have you.
Is there some way the legal system can clarify the federal law better?
That's our job. You got to find the right case, though, and you would have to essentially, you would have to ask her, or.
Like this lady, she claimed, well, I already sued one time because of this, you know.
Did you look it up to see if she had?
Unfortunately, my officer never got her name.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Is she still?
No, she hasn't been back in since.
Okay.
No.
This is an apartment building?
No, and our Flint Institute Arts right next door.
Oh, gotcha.
I mean, we have literally millions of dollars worth of valuable art in there, and we don't allow animals in there because they just cause damage to the art. You know, and so it's like I said, she come walking in and just ignored the officer, walked right past him with 2 large standard-sized poodles. And when he finally did catch up to her, that's when she claimed that they were service animals and she needed them. And so that's when we started doing some research on it and found out that we don't have much recourse with it.
You really don't, unfortunately.
And I liked it that they made miniature horses as service animals.
Yep. Yeah. Were the animals behaved?
Well, she had them on a short leash.
Okay.
You know, but still, the fact is that she had 2 of them and refused to, state anything and said, I'll sue you and all this other kind of stuff.
Unfortunately, it may be a situation where it's a person taking advantage of the system, but you never know. I wouldn't be quick to jump at it, saying she probably doesn't have a disability, but
What I understand and looking at my tapes, she didn't look like she was disabled.
Well, a lot of times, I mean, she certainly has to be disabled under the Act. She has to have some sort of disability that's covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Now, like dogs that are in training to be service animals, we can refuse them in, correct? I mean, because they're not service animals yet if they're in training.
Correct. And certainly the person training them is not disabled, I would think.
And that's the other thing, they don't have to be certified to be trainers here in the state at all.
That I just had this happen in the case up north. There was a gentleman called himself an applied animal behaviorist, and there's no certification for that sort of thing. He basically had a psychology degree, and for 10 years was working on an advanced degree and acted as an expert witness in a case. I evaluated a couple of dogs, and the judge believed him, believe it or not. I couldn't believe it. It happens. There's just no certification for that kind of thing. Yeah.
But usually people who take in those dogs to train them, they belong to a general organization.
Meaning?
Meaning that I've always been under the assumption, because I've known people who have taken those dogs in and were in the process of training them, that they belong to a greater
A service service
Yeah,
dogs?
and I was
Yeah.
just under the impression that that organization teaches those individuals how to train that dog. Not that there's a legal, like an accredited university type program, but
No.
at least there's an organization.
There is an accreditation for that. I don't think it's required. I'm not going
Okay, I
to swear by
got
that.
you.
I know there is one in Davison, actually. I just talked to him a few weeks ago that
Okay,
does training for service dogs. They do the training initially and
Okay.
then work with the person that dog is being going or miniature horse is going to serve. Absolutely. Different story. Yep. They can go pretty much where they want.
even with Oakland Parks.
Yep. Yep, they're supposed to, and I don't know what's going to happen with that. It's going to be very interesting because the person from the animal law section who took up that cause is from the litigation committee, which normally is not where we start in dealing with it. Because there's no lawsuit filed yet. It's simply working with the county to point out they're wrong, hopefully, and let them realize it on their own. Go ahead.
Oh, I have a question. Oh, a friend of mine, Jennifer, well, I'm a cat lover, but I prefer the dogs that are real sweet and gentle. And I've made that very clear to her that those are the only kind of dogs I really like, the sweet and gentle ones. But the problem is, that even though she knows how I feel, it's like almost 24/7. She'll keep talking about dogs all the time, and it really gets on my nerves. And is there anything I can say or do to get her to not keep harping on dogs so often to where it's like really getting on my nerves? I mean, I don't know if I want to totally lose her as a friend, but what can I do to? I gotta keep hearing about dogs all the time, and I don't know.
Just politely tell her, you know what, I'm more of a cat person. I would rather not hear about dogs at this point. I think it's probably the best way to go about it. Keep your friend and hopefully.
What's a good way to get into animal law? Like, is there a specific program at a school, or did you just kind of happen into it?
I never took a course in animal law.
Okay.
The one thing I really enjoy about animal law is it covers so many different areas of the law. I mean, you're dealing with personal property issues, you're dealing with contracts, you're dealing with civil rights matters, you're dealing with, statutory and regulatory matters. In fact, a lot of it, I don't do criminal law. I stay away from it, but dangerous dog issues are about as close as you can get to criminal law.
Say if you were talking to a teenager who's about to graduate high school and they say, I'm really interested in becoming a lawyer doing animal law, what advice would you give them?
There are schools in Michigan now, at MSU. The College of Law actually has animal law courses. I believe Wayne State does now. University of Michigan does on occasion. It depends on interest, but I know Wayne State and MSU both have a regular, actually a litany of courses you can take that cover, anything from environmental type issues, wildlife law, those types of things. In fact, one of the professors at MSU is, he's one of the biggest experts on that issue. In fact, he created a website through, I don't know if you've seen it, it's called animallaw.info. It's the biggest compilation of animal-related legal matters on the internet that I know of anyway, and it covers countrywide. It might be a good place for you to look as well about the Americans with Disabilities Act. I know that they do have things on there about that.
Animallaw.info?
Yep, and it actually takes you, it's a MSU, there's the MSU logos on it and everything, so you know when you get there, but you can actually pick by state which laws you want to talk about or subject matter. If you want to just look up Americans with Disabilities Act, there's a little drop downs that you just click. It's very user friendly and very, you don't have to be a lawyer to read it. It's written for that purpose.
Well, to change the federal laws, does there have to be an actual lawsuit involved, or can legislation be brought in to more clarify it?
Legislation is usually the way it goes. To change it through the court system would be a long, extremely expensive
So we have
process.
to get our senators together to put something on.
If we can keep them off Twitter, yeah. We can probably do that.
Maybe they can campaign it on Twitter.
Yeah. Exactly. So, yeah, and you always wonder where some of our, like the other day when the gentleman from Grosse Pointe, I believe it was, introduced the pit bull ban bill, made you wonder where he's coming from. We have such issues in this state. We're introducing a bill like that that's going to cost the state how many millions of dollars to enforce, going across. 10 years essentially is what it was. It was a phase out over 10 years of ownership of the dogs. And how you're going to determine which ones are pit bulls, I have no idea. I have two, my wife is big into doing the DNA tests on the dogs, just to see, because every single one of our dogs is a Heinz 57 to the nth degree. It's ridiculous. But two of them, the only things that showed up were American Staffordshire Terrier. And you would look at them and say, no way, not a chance in the world. So I look at those types of things and I wonder who is going to determine which one of these, who's a pit bull, what's a pit bull. In fact, the blog that they mentioned at the beginning, I tend to focus on that. I've been a little remiss in updating it lately, but I tend to focus mostly on pit bull issues. And in this area, a lot of people want to hear about that kind of thing.
Pit bulls.
There are a ton of them. And, you guys probably know as well as anyone. Have you been there long?
Well, I've been there for 10 years as a volunteer.
Okay.
And then 7 as a board member. And about 4 days as the executive director. So.
Feet to the fire, right?
Yeah, in a good way.
Yep, good. We met, we've been at the Paws on Parade for the last couple of years. It was,
Thank you.
yeah, wonderful event. Great place too. So.
We have another one coming up this fall.
Do you?
It's like it's a Flint golf called Ties and Tails, where you can actually bring your dog to a sit-down blank tie dinner. So.
How fun will that be?
It's pretty fun. We did it
How much
2
per
years
plate?
ago. We don't know yet.
How much per plate?
We don't know yet. I have a question as a dog owner.
Okay.
I feel that I'm responsible for my animals' behavior when they're inside their own yard and people come inside the yard.
Yes.
Does it make any difference from a legal standpoint if I have a beware of dog sign up or not? If something were to happen, if someone came in my yard and very friendly dogs, nothing's going to happen, but I have a group of friends that have dogs and have beware of dog signs up that seem to feel like it'd be less of a issue because they have a sign up if something were to happen.
Like a true lawyer, I'm going to tell you it can go both ways. If it's in a prominent place and the people, I think the situation would be more if you had an enclosed yard with beware of dog as you have to enter and they come into your yard uninvited and your dog, for whatever reason, molests them, bites them, whatever it might be. I think that would help your case at that point in time. The way the dangerous dog law is written and the dog bite law is written, it certainly would be a great case if you had a beware of dog sign. The other way it can go is, I've seen lawyers on the other side argue in situations like that, is you knew that that dog had dangerous tendencies. So that's why you put the sign out. You should have had better control of your dog. You knew someone was coming over or could have come over, be it a meter reader or a UPS guy, whoever it might be. So it can go both ways. If your dog is not had any of those tendencies, I personally would not put one, just because it could cause more trouble. Than it's easier for a good dog owner to take control of their animal.
So along that same question, would a dog bite that caused harm be viewed differently than a large dog that jumped up on someone, wagging their tail and knocked them over and hurt them?
Absolutely. For the purposes of the dangerous dog law, yes, absolutely. Now, if that big dog jumped up on someone and injured them to the point where they had to go either to the hospital or seek medical treatment, you're dealing with basically regular negligence law at that point in time, or something along those lines, but it certainly wouldn't be for the dangerous dog law. Under the dangerous dog law, it has to be serious injury or death, and serious injury is defined as disfigurement and things along those lines. So it has to be a fairly substantial injury.
Thank you.
Okay. How about the Westies?
Well, they're excellent questions. But it would be one of those things as, if I were gone and someone would break into my house. Oh, you're looking for the jewelry? It's over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Generally speaking, very good.
Now, what does your group do?
Well, we are, the club was started by breeders. One of our purposes was to ensure that the breed remains pure and that we breed to the standard. And we put on a specialty show each year because we do that. But our club is rescue.
Okay.
So we do that too. My biggest thing about rescue is that it's really a shame. Here we are, we're trying to show you what the proper to the standard breed is, and yet, unfortunately, so many of the issues in rescue are puppy mill and they're breeders that don't live up to standard. But like I say, it's not the dog's fault.
Sure.
But anyway, and we have educational things. We try to educate a newsletter.
Okay.
And we have where I actually found out about this was on our list where things are discussed. Whatever.
Okay.
Give a brag sometimes.
Sure.
Or sometimes people have an issue. Well, my dog has got this sore in his mouth. You know, dealt with this. Or, gee, my dog had diarrhea, blah, blah, blah. Has anybody else had this lately? Like, is it the dog flu? Things like that.
Sure.
It's friendly.
Do you use I assume you adopt dogs out or sell them?
Rescue dogs.
Rescues. Do you use a contract?
You talk to Beth Withers about that because she is the one who handles it. I'm sure she does. They're very strict in their home inspections. I did a home inspection for a foster.
Okay, so you do home inspections as well?
Yeah, you know, inspect for the fosters, and then they always, and for foster plus, inspect, they have somebody go to and inspect the person's place where their dog's will be. Because anybody can say, oh yes, I have a foster, and
The number one issue I get from rescue groups is contract disputes, because they either found someone's contract online or they're using a one-page thing because they don't want to use a lot of paper, and they'll come to me and say, well, I want to do X, Y, or Z, and I said, your contract doesn't say that. Why not? And they, well, we didn't think about it. We've been thinking of revising it. I've probably done 20 or 25 contracts in the last year, especially dealing with inspections, home inspection type of thing, return of the animal. I got into a big dispute and I say it was personally with the Michigan Humane Society over one of my own animals, because their contract states, as the state law does, that the animal, if it's less than 6 months old, it has to be spayed or neutered. In the contract, it has to state that if it's not spayed or neutered when you get it, at 6 months, when it turns 6 months or 4 weeks thereafter, it has to be spayed or neutered, and you have to provide proof. My vet wanted to wait until it was 6 months. She was 6 months old. Well, we had adopted her when she was 3 months old. Right before I had the appointment to get her spayed, they called me and said they were coming to get my dog because she was not spayed or neutered. We didn't provide anything. We went round and round. I sent them a copy of the state law and their contract, and those types of disputes can go on, and it's simply a matter of contract in most cases. They incorporate the state law into a lot of. You guys are a licensed shelter, right? Yeah, so I'm pretty sure you are. I think you're one of the 3 or 4 in the county. So you have to have those terms in your contract. It can't vary. So dealing with those types of issues, whether or not a lot of people I've run into where, in fact, with specific breed rescues where they want to go back and do a visit within 6 months. They don't want to put the person who adopted that animal, they don't want to make them mad by saying, we want to come out and take a look, because they don't want the people who basically think they're being bad owners or thought they're being bad owners by the rescue group that adopted them, the animal. But it has to be in there. We ran into one situation where they had Scotty, out keeping it out in the middle of nowhere, tied to an igloo during some of the freezing cold last January. And I said, I'm really sorry. You're going to waste your money going into court trying to do this because it's not in your contract. You can't do it. Animal control went out there, looked, said the animal's got shelter, everything's under control. Not much you can do. We revised her contract, but that poor woman worried all winter about that poor dog. No, and it could have been just fine, but the contracts are yours. You can put anything you want in there, within reason, obviously.
Well, those of us who breed, we have our sales contracts that go with our puppies or state certification.
I know some of the breed-specific rescues actually include the mandatory fixing of the animal in their contracts as well, because they don't want them, especially if they're a small, respectable breeder, they don't want people taking them, like you say, and backyard breeding these animals and making money off them. The problem you always run into is enforcement, because you have to take it into court, unless your lawyer can, rattle the saber loud enough to scare them into doing it. But
Well, one thing with AKC registration, they have what they call limited registration. You want them to neuter it, you'll say, need to neuter it. And they promise neuter, but if you sell it on limited registration, if by chance they don't, then if they decide to breed it, those puppies cannot be registered.
right.
Under limited registration. But many breeders will withhold the AKC papers until they get the state
Proof.
from the
Right. And it's a good idea too. A lot of people, I've taken numerous sources from around the country and created everything but the kitchen sink contract. And we start with that when I'm representing someone and they say, we don't want to have our clients agree to something like that. So we just start removing things. And you know what? They end up in a better place for doing it. That's for anybody who's adopting out animals or selling animals for that reason, for that matter, be it a small-time breeder. a contract is extremely important. I can't even emphasize it enough. It all starts right there. So that's a really big thing for you. I've seen, we have an animal from Humane Society of Genesee County. I've seen them, their contract is excellent. I was shocked. We pulled an animal from Genesee County Animal Control the other day at what they give you is essentially a receipt. We had to beg for the rabies proof. We had to, the animal had just had some worming done, and we couldn't get that from them. We had to go to their vet to go get it and beg them for it. So I couldn't believe that the county has that little in their sales contracts.
The way you started out years ago, it wasn't such a litigious society.
Blame the lawyers.
We do. All
You
the time.
should. You
In
should.
fact, we blame them for most of our laws, because many of the people who are making the laws are attorneys, or have been.
I get frowned upon a lot we just in fact had a animal law section conference call yesterday where we have a meeting, and there is a legislative committee that deals with helping to write or assist in trying to influence the way they write in the language of the laws. And I am more of a litigator. I prefer to be in court. I deal with the laws as they're already written. So I'm almost always very highly critical of how they're written. I don't know how to go about writing them, nor do I want to. I was sick in dealing with some of the legislative processes during last year. And when I read them, I just say, who wrote this? A kindergartner? This took you how long to write? It's awful. But no offense to the kindergartners in the library. That's just the way it is sometimes, I guess. You deal with the cards that you're dealt. There are numerous law changes going on right now, where, because we got the budget in order in the state, there's a lot of different animal-related legislation that is going to be reintroduced this year. Banning the gas chamber. In fact, I think it should have been introduced today. Banning the gas chamber in the remaining counties that do it. Banning Class B dealers for selling for research. They're actually adding something similar to the federal RICO laws to the dogfighting statute in Michigan, so that it can be dogfighting can actually be a primary offense in Michigan. I know. There's a case going on right now down in Monroe County where there was a dogfighting bust, and I would call her a very good friend of mine, Joni Wosley from the Buster Foundation, is fighting to be able to keep 4 of these dogs. 4 of them were actually turned over to him by a judge, but the one prosecutor wants these animals put down. These dogs presumably were never involved in fighting. Her group is taking care of them and has evaluated them, and they feel they're certainly rehabilitable, I guess is the word. But the way the law is written, the dogfighting law in Michigan, I've talked to her about it. I said, I'm not sure. It's very unclear as to whether they can actually have it. Technically, the way the law is written, the first line of the law says you cannot sell, possess, transfer, something along those lines, any dog that is known to have been involved in a dogfighting operation. Includes Humane Society, so it would be a misdemeanor at this point in time for them to take a hold of those dogs and adopt them out, the way it's being interpreted by the county prosecutor. They're just saying they were.
He said, she said.
Exactly. And who are you going to believe? And then it goes in front of a judge and they make that decision. Now there's another dogfighting bust up in Huron and Lenawee County. They were kind of related last year, but it was done by the federal courts. And they were charged under the federal statute in Detroit. And there were several puppies that were offspring of the dogs that were born in the shelters once they took them. And the federal judge in Detroit, David Lawson, actually ruled. There was argument, briefs filed, and everything over this by, I think it was the Kent County Humane Society is the one who got involved, and they got these dogs released last year. He said, I don't read the law that way. It makes absolutely no sense to read it that way and let it go. So I'm hoping that the judge, the state court judge in Monroe County sees it the same way. But they are actually adding that, trying to revise that statute as well. It's actually under the penal code to include allowance of the humane societies or shelters or rescues that have the animals in their possession to be able to independently evaluate them and adopt them out if they want to, or if they can meet the guidelines under the law, obviously, as well.
I'd like your opinion on how you would have handled this. Back in April, my niece was visiting over at, I live with my mother, and she was visiting over at my mother's house. And she went outside, walked a distance, and found this puppy that was obviously a pit. And she brought it back to the house. And it was a sweet little thing, just innocent, green, just happy to meet somebody new. It was obvious to us that the dog belonged to somebody because it had a collar on, and plus it was so well behaved.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew it belonged to somebody. And but my niece is impulsive. She likes anything that's a baby, whether it's a kitten or a puppy. And so she took off and went home and took the puppy with her, and she had it a few weeks. Then she decided she wanted a kitten, so she actually went and got a kitten. But in the interim, maybe they had that dog with them maybe 3 weeks.
Okay.
And I did instruct my niece. I said, if you're not going to keep the dog, you need to take it to the Humane Society. Under no circumstance do you take it to the Genesee County Animal Shelter, because they will put that dog down,
Right.
even though it's a puppy. Whereas at least at the Humane Society, they don't automatically put it down just because it's a pet.
Right.
And so she didn't listen. She had her mother load up the dog and take it to the county shelter, and they instructed my niece, and I don't think my sister got out of the car with my niece when my niece went in to drop the dog off, but they instructed her this dog will be put down by Friday if nobody claims this dog.
Right.
Now, I used to work up there, so I know the director personally, and my sister called me one day and she said, is there anything we can do? I don't want that dog put down. I'd rather try to find its owner, or I'll keep the dog, but I don't want the dog put down. And I said, well, I told your daughter don't do that. I said, I'll get up in the morning and go speak with Stephanie, and I did that. And Stephanie's words were, I can't release the dog to you. I can only release it to an owner. And I told Stephanie, okay, my niece found the dog. It's been in my niece's possession for the last 3 weeks. So I kind of felt like there was some wiggle room. Like, if the animal was with you for 3 weeks, can't you kind of sort of claim it as your own? Or I know it's a foggy place, but
It's a real foggy place.
yeah. But my mother later told me that my sister even went down to City Hall to find out what she could do, and I don't know why she did that. I think it really got to my sister, whereas for me, I just emotionally detached, because it's like, well, your daughter didn't listen, she didn't follow instructions. But in a situation like that, like if my sister had come to you and said, help, what should I do? How would you have handled that?
I will concur with Stephanie that she shouldn't have given the dog to you. She can't legally. It was probably treated, I would guess, as an owner surrender when you brought it in.
Okay.
No, probably not if she was giving it the week. So I just listed it as a stray. She's got it. She's required to keep it for that whole time. So
I
if you
think they
came
dropped
in
it off
during
on
the whole time,
Monday,
yeah.
and they put it down on Friday.
Yeah. So she can't release it to you unless you can show that's your
How old is
dog.
your niece?
She's a knucklehead 15.
Mhm.
Just as, what's the word for it? Moves at every whim. Every kitten she's found this year, she's picked it up and brought it home, and I'll go get the kitten and take it to the closest cat rescue, and she's nonstop. In fact, the cat that I have was her cat originally, so I rescued him from her because she's constantly bringing kittens home. Yeah, so she's an impulsive person, to say the least. But yeah, it was a sad thing because it was a precious puppy, and it didn't deserve that end. You know, I think it would have been easier to put up posters in the neighborhood.
There, yes, that's probably from the beginning the way I would have gone. Post everything everywhere.
Right.
If it was even remotely bit, I certainly would not have taken it to animal control. I know sometimes you guys get full with pets and can't take them anymore too because there's just so many of them around here. It's a difficult situation. I know Saginaw used to not adopt them out either. I'm pretty sure they still don't. But
Some newspapers will even put a free ad in.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if you call, they'll put if you lost a dog or found one or cat, they will run the ad for free for
Okay.
a certain period of time. I don't know if it's a week or 2
That's
weeks.
good to know.
Yeah,
That's
that's,
good to know.
it's difficult, and I always hear a lot of people say we can't save them all, but
It's true.
I refuse to believe it. In the back of my mind, but I know the reality of it. I get in trouble every time I go into animal control. I get in trouble every time I go into your guys' place because I either usually come out with once you put a face to it, it's hard. I went into animal control a couple of weeks ago, and there's a lab in there that I found out they thought he had hip dysplasia, so he's going to be put down. They ended up having to pull that dog out of there, get him into a rescue. And, I'm still dealing with it right now, but it's all because I just stopped in there one day to pick up some stuff for someone else and saw that animal. We've been into your place and come home with a kitten. I mean, it's really hard to do, and I'm allergic to cats. I have 2 of them. I live on Benadryl. There are just issues all over the place, and every which way you turn, you're going to find some way the law is related to it in some way, shape, or form. But in your case, I would concur with Stephanie's opinion on that. Unfortunately.
Does the Michigan Department of Agriculture inspect any of these
Yes.
puppy mill places?
Puppy mills,
Well,
if you can report them. Yeah, they don't have much. If they're licensed as a kennel, and most of them are,
That's right.
the MDA has jurisdiction over them. Now, if it's just simply someone with a real high fence and a bunch of dogs in a barn that they're breeding, and the MDA doesn't know about it, it's usually a law enforcement issue, animal control.
The Amish.
Whole other story.
They do.
I know, it's a whole nother story. But, like I said, you're gonna turn every which direction and see that somehow the law is related. And it could be any which way. The issues just are gonna go on forever and ever and ever until, it's amazing from county to county. I talked to a lot of different prosecutors and how they interpret the different laws. One guy says, no way, or the other guy says, oh yeah, we do that all the time. Okay. How can you have any consistency if you're doing anything like that? Education is going to be the best way to go about it, and the more people want to learn, websites like that animal law .info place, there's a lot of other places. I'm personally prefer Best Friends. They have a lot of great information on their website. Oregon.
.org.
No, they're out of Utah.
Yeah.
Did you?
They're no-kill those, right?
Yes. There's one in Michigan called Mackenzie's, I believe it is, Sanctuary out west, Grand Rapids area.
The blog, what was that? Animal,
mishanimalla.blogspot.com, and I'll try to update it more frequently.
Are there 2 L's in that, Michigan law? I mean, animal law?
Yes, where it comes together, it's 2 L's.
Now that you told us you're updating, they're gonna do it.
I'm gonna have to.
Guess we'll be looking at it tomorrow.
Oh, I thank you guys for coming out.